Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Detections with your hosts, Understudy 77, and
Exile the Trades.
you might notice that as we start this, that I sound a little bit different. Or maybe you can't hear Frank in the background, which would also be awesome. I can't really tell, I don't know. But I got a new microphone.
Nice. Which one was it?
So I ended up getting a Blue Yeti X, and it's really interesting because, like, I've talked to a couple of people, and they're like, you got to get rid of that shitty microphone. And I'm like, my problem isn't that my microphone's crappy. My problem is that my microphone's too nice. Like, it's a microphone that I used to use for music production, right? So, like, it's very sensitive. And where I live now, I don't have sound paneling on the walls anymore like I used to. I have a 15U server rack that's sitting 3 feet away from me. It's just not built for that kind of mic. So, like, I thought the Yeti X was really cool, because it's still blue and I like blue microphones. But on top of that, the thing that I really like about it is it's got this like built-in software suite. So, like, I'm hearing myself as the mic hears me, but I can actually run it through like a compressor and a noise gate and a bunch of other shit to tune out background noise, and kind of change some stuff around. So, like, I'm not, processing audio at the mic, but I'm processing it on my computer before it gets to here, which means that's less work that I have to do later with, like, trying to level out and trying to remove stuff. And, like, we're lazy, right? So, like, we don't do a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing I was going to say is also we don't record in a recording studio. So having something to cancel out some of the background noise for recording in open rooms sounds pretty legit.
Absolutely. Speaking of new things, we have another new thing too, don't we?
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. We may have spent a little bit too much time on it, but it definitely shows that we love what we're doing with the new retooled website.
Ooh.
It's pretty cool. Check it out. It's at the same domain because, we own that detections.org, but we put a few Easter eggs in there for people to go find.
So here's the thing. Maybe we spent a little bit too much, but probably not. I mean, all in all, it was, 6 to 12 hours or whatever. What that whole thing proves, though, is that I can't sit still. Like, I just can't. Like, I don't have the ability. I got home, I had some time. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll watch some TV or play a video game or like a normal human being. Fuck, maybe I'll even hang out with my family. Like, that's a novel concept. And I'm like, you know what? No, like, let's just like try to make Blogger, like, let's add in some buttons and make that cool. And I'm like, wait, this sucks. Let's build a whole new website.
Yeah. And you got that all started and mostly going while I'm still at work. So I'm like, dude, I haven't even had a chance to step in yet.
Right? You were somewhere between like at work or asleep. I can't remember which one it was. And then I sent it to you and I'm like, God, I really hope you like this because I just spent the last 6 hours on it. But
and then of course I'm like, but let me go tweak some things.
And that works out fine. That's how this works. We're a team. TEEM. And then also we have another new thing that you probably won't hear now, but you will hear probably in the near future, right?
Yeah. So I mentioned a few episodes ago that I was working with someone to get some intro outro music commission. Well, we both have heard the rough cuts, and I'm pretty excited about the direction it's going, and I'm looking forward to the finished work and being able to help us make that next step into the appearance of being more professional, where we know those who listen to the podcast know that's not true.
That's very true. And here's something that we promise you. It's not going to be that long, especially for the intro, because like if I was trying to like sit down and watch all these and I had to listen to like 30 seconds of intro every time, no matter how good the music is, I'd be like, all right, I'm kind of sick of this. Like, that's the downside of like the binge watching era, right?
Yep.
So like I binge watch TV shows and like I got to hear the intro song every time. And I'm like, man, I don't want to do this. So it will be a snippet that is enough to say, hey, this is Detections, but not quite so much that it'll be like way too much or too long or like you'll get sick of it eventually. I hope. Also, like, I hope you don't get sick of it because it's dope.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
Man, it's been like a busy week, a busy couple weeks, actually, because like we recorded other episodes for the future in the past.
And we're about to do it again.
Yeah, we are. Like several of them. Yeah. But like in between all that time, like So I was at Shmukon last weekend, which I want to talk about for a minute.
Yes, please do.
And then the day I got back from Shmukon, I took a vacation day, and you know what I did? Not only make a new website, but I ended up on another podcast called Breaking Into InfoSec, which was a lot of fun. Like, I really enjoyed going to talk to those guys. I talked about like how I hire, like what I look for in candidates, like resume and interview advice, the type of work that I do, a little bit of my backstory. Like, it was really cool. I don't know that, in InfoSec, I've ever been interviewed before. I'm always the interviewer, not the interviewee. So that was kind of a cool experience. And then I got a talk accepted to B-Sides Nova, which is next month. So I'll be going and giving a talk there. And subsequently, I'm giving the same talk next week at a high school InfoSec class. Introduction to malware analysis at both locations. So if you're there and you're interested, check it out. If you're not interested, you should probably turn this episode off because we're actually talking about malware analysis tonight anyway.
The high school one is dope. Like, being able to help intelligent young adults with some initial exposure to that, to see if it is something that they want to pursue, take it beyond like just this theoretical or news thing. That's pretty cool. I'm excited the most about that.
I am too, but it's actually a little nerve-wracking, right? Because so I did this at a middle school, and I'm like, well, I definitely know more than a middle schooler, so this should be okay. And then I gave a similar talk at DEF CON, and I was like, oh, somebody's going to call me out. Like, I'm totally going to get like booed off stage. But it went really, really well, and like people seem to really like it, which further proves like there's a high demand for like entry-level content that people just aren't filling, which is fucking weird to me. I guess it's not the next best thing, right?
No, but and that goes back to why we started this podcast, right? Like, both you and I were like, let's at least provide some resource for those new or seeking to enter into the field. And I'm pretty amazed by the growth of the podcast in 4 months now.
Yeah, it's been pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And like, I thank all of you who listen, because it's humbling and amazing and super cool that people actually want to listen to us talk.
Yeah. You should, when we send messages over Discord to each other, like, did you see the stats? And we're like, yeah, I'm blown away and humbled and don't understand what's happening.
Right. But like the high school thing. So I was talking to the teacher of this class, and I was like, well, what are they interested in? And I said, I do an introduction to malware analysis class. She goes, well, they're pretty bright. Like, I think intro might be a little bit too basic. And I'm like, shit. One, I really only know how to teach intro. But two, I'm sitting here thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? I got really, really frightened when I gave this at DEF CON. It was in a village, but still, I talked at DEF CON. I don't care. You can't take that from me. But like, it went really well, even though I was really nervous about it. So I'm like, you know what? High school kids, I shouldn't say kids, high school students, it should go over well enough. I'm hoping. If it doesn't, then whatever. It happens. And I never have to see them again. Hopefully.
You will be fine. I have a feeling like you're maybe going to encounter one or two students that are kind of familiar with it beforehand.
It's possible. So, Shmukon every year. And I'm telling you, dude, like next year, like put aside, like you have to come out to Shmukon. It is my favorite of pretty much all of them.
Well, all the pictures, seeing you, Blind Hacker, all the people in DPS, like the stuff you were sharing, I'm like, serious FOMO going on over here on the West Coast.
Right? It is just, so it's one of those things that like, so, Derby for you is always going to be very special.
Yes.
Shmukon, so I went to DEF CON, but like I don't count DEF CON. My first major conference I also happened to keynote at, and that was B-Sides Charm, which is coming up in April. And I'm actually involved with that conference now, and it's a really, really good B-Sides, but it's a B-Sides. Shmukon was like the first like, oh, like this is where the cool kids are, right? Or whatever. And I've been going every year for the last several years, and I can't figure out how to crack their CFP because like my dream is to talk at Shmukon. But it's just such a good conference. Like, and that's with me not going to see any talks or anything. It's just, I'm up at 9 a.m. I'm out till 5 a.m, and I'm having wonderful conversations with wonderful people. Shout out to like Cassie Cage, TJ Knoll, Blind Hacker, BSD Bandit, Gether. I'm going to give a couple shout outs in that sense. Like it's just it basically feels like home to me in a lot of ways. And I always see people that I'm really close with. And then I meet new people like Advanced Persistent Tequila or Mr. Black Cipher, who like I didn't really know before, but now I know. And like, I'm glad I do. So like, I usually leave that conference with like having seen and caught up with a lot of really good friends, having solidified some friendships even more, and having made new friends, which is awesome to me. And like, I met a bunch of people who actually liked the podcast, which was really striking to me.
I was just going to say, like, didn't you kind of meet some people that are fans of the podcast?
Yeah, I was like standing in line at registration and somebody's like, I really like the podcast. I was like, whoa, dude, thank you. Like, here's a patch. However, everybody who did say they were a fan, I told them that they're not allowed. I said they're allowed to be friends. They're not allowed to be fans.
Yes.
And that goes to everybody who listens. You're allowed to be friends. You're not allowed to be fans.
Yeah, because trust me, nothing about either one of us is worth putting up on a pedestal. I
agree with that. If you need proof of that, go back to like episode 3 where we complain about people who are put up on pedestals. So I'm happy to have friends. I'm not happy to have fans.
Or go back to 11 when we have a special guest appearance from my apartment.
Right? Exactly. Showing our ever persistent and gross professionality and wonderful editing skills as your ears bleed. That was just like one episode ago.
Yeah.
So that being said, and that stuff being said, like there's a lot coming up. I know you're talking soon. I'm talking soon. There's, we're coming full bore into like conference season, right? So like we're gonna have a lot to talk about there. But what the fuck is in the news?
we got some cool stuff here, and I think it might be cool if we just go back and forth because unlike previous episodes, none of these are really kind of related.
Let's do it.
So I will start it off with an interesting thing that Google pulled out. We'll pull Google in the news again. But they made a change.
This isn't as bad as like Nighthawk, though.
Exactly. No. This is actually kind of cool because they made a change to where all paid Chrome extensions were suspended from updating due to a security issue. So they were actually taking the user into consideration with suspending paid because of how much the paid ones were being leveraged to do malicious activity.
It's really interesting because that's not usually something you hear, right? Like you don't usually hear like that thing that you pay for, like that's malicious. Usually when you pay for something, it's better. It's the free shit you got to look out for. So for them to have a security problem on paid stuff is really interesting.
And then they do the responsible thing and keep just kind of do like a blanket block until they manage to fix the problem on their end.
Now, correct me because I'm not super familiar. Is this they're suspending it because paid apps are malicious or because there was some exploit on paid apps?
There was.
Oh, I see why.
Yeah.
Fraudulent transactions. So like people were charging money for apps that weren't bad or that didn't really exist or do what they were supposed to do.
Correct.
Oh, good guy, Google, which is not something that I say very often these days.
We don't normally say. Normally it's like, bad fuck Big Brother Google, but this time it was kind of a good choice.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to go like way back and I'm going to correct something that we got wrong because I think correcting our own mistakes is important. And I'm going to give a shout out to Christopher Glyer at FireEye for this, who's a really smart guy. We're not entirely wrong, but we also like we missed something relatively important. Remember when we were talking about like email and link analysis and we were like, click all the things, nothing bad will happen to you. In that sense, we were wrong because we forgot about something. You know what we forgot about?
What was that?
The tracking pixel.
Oh, the tracking pixel. Yes, that 1x1 off the screen hidden pixel.
Correct. And there's so to give you a bit of an explanation, a tracking pixel is like a hidden pixel that can do a bunch of stuff. It's used largely to evaluate success of an email marketing or phishing campaign. And I'm basically quoting Chris in this, or information gathering before sending a follow-up. So basically like that pixel is calling from a website, and like it can fingerprint stuff and figure out things about your computer. So like you can see multiple URLs when you look at like the actual contents of the email. The tracking pixel like can do a whole bunch of stuff, including, you know, your OS version, your email client that exists, some different information about your system, your IP address. Like those are all things that you can get from this concept of a tracking pixel just by opening the email. So here's the thing, and there's a couple that they talk about.
Hold on, did you say just by opening the email and no one clicked on anything?
Correct, just by opening the email. So you're not infecting yourself, but you are giving up information about yourself, right? However, many browsers today actually kind of don't allow it, but many do. So like the Outlook Thick client blocks tracking pixels. Office 365 in the web, however, actually loads the pixel. iPhone Mail client, same thing. Android Mail client, same thing. Gmail, same thing. However, you can actually go into a lot of the settings. So like in Gmail, you can disable auto image loading, and basically you can stop this problem by just disabling auto image loading, because that's what it is. It's an image. It's pulling an image from a website. So if you disable auto image loading in any of your email clients, you're basically kind of keeping yourself safe from this perspective. But it was good for us to roll back and kind of, you know, elaborate on that and give you another thing that you can do there. Because I am more than happy to be wrong and learn something new, because I wasn't fully aware of the actual data that could go out with this.
Yeah, lots of people can do interesting things with that tracking pixel.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, one of the things I learned at Shmukon, this was like a challenge question by a friend of mine, Russell, and his like 15-year-old daughter, who gave a talk about how to stay safe online. It was amazing, by the way.
Nice.
How many pieces of metadata exist in every tweet?
Oh, God.
Take a guess.
35.
No. 144, if my memory serves.
Jesus.
That's insane.
I knew it was a lot. Like, I didn't know the specific number, but I'm like, there's a lot.
That's insane, isn't it? Just like any other news, the tweet will be, a link to the tweet will be posted on the brand new website so that you can read Chris's entire thing about tracking pixels. It's a really wonderful read. It's just phenomenal. And I strongly encourage people to read it and kind of expand that knowledge set, because it was a really cool thing to talk about. What else you got?
So I'm actually going to go reference something back from the past too. Remember how we shared an article at one of our first episodes about the trend in 2020 that we saw upcoming about ransomware moving from just extortion to blackmail?
Yeah.
By publishing that. So that actually happened. There was a car parts group in Germany, I think it was, that got hit by the Sodi no Kibi group. And they didn't pay the ransomware in time, so they published publicly staff passwords that they had captured through their ransomware.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so they're going to do anything they can to get paid, right?
Yep. But yeah, so it was like proof. One of those first articles that we saw about how that being a potential is becoming a reality now that with ransomware being the current trend with trying to hit people. Not only are they trying to extort to get your data back, but if you don't pay in time, they're going to publish your data.
You ready for another callback?
Yes.
That honestly, at some point, we should really just consider this to be a segment of the show.
Ring?
Yeah, the ring. Hey. So the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who are awesome, and if you don't donate to them, you probably should. Okay. If you can afford it, like, don't donate if you can't, like, you know. But they're a really wonderful charity. They really are. They put out an investigation of the ring, and they found it to be loaded with third-party trackers, sending a plethora of PII. 4 main analytics and marketing companies were discovered to be receiving information such as names, private IP addresses, mobile network carriers, persistent identifiers, and sensor data on the devices of paying customers. That's a lot of information.
And I think you're right. We probably need like a This Week in Ring News.
Right? It's that bad.
Yeah.
Like, it's legitimately that bad. Yet we still know many people who are like, I don't care. I like it.
Have we gone an episode without at least having some Ring News?
Probably one or two, but like it has to be the higher percentage of the 12 episode run that we've had so far that we've talked about the Ring.
Jeez.
All right, what else you got?
So I got something a little close to home.
Literally, right?
Literally a little close to home. That there was a county, Tillamook County. Now, some people may recognize the name Tillamook if they're cheese eaters. Tillamook has a fantastic cheese and ice cream.
I knew I recognized that name. Although, for all the people in DPS, I do prefer Velveeta. Sorry, couldn't resist carrying that one over.
Velveeta. But Tillamook, bringers of cheese and fantastic ice cream, their county computers, phones, and websites actually got hit by a targeted attack. And it got posted here in our local news. It's really kind of the first one that we've seen out here on the West.
What hit them? Was it a ransomware thing or was it a full-on hack?
It looks like it was mostly a DDoS.
I mean, a smaller township kind of thing, like that can cripple somebody. Like that old methodology still works.
Yep. Especially with more rural areas like this where they have limited technology access, which, I mean, I'm going to jump to Rural Tech Fund here really quick, which is why I like them a lot, because in the state of Oregon, there's a lot of really rural areas that don't have high technology access. And so even a little thing like this that's a focused DDoS has a huge impact to people with the technology there. So like the county there was unable to take any sort of electronic payment for anything. And they had to try to figure out workarounds where they once had old analog ways but were removed to increase the efficiency by using the computer systems. So it literally had a governmental impact for this small rural area by just not being able to access services and have intermittent phone issues and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, when I was doing IR, we did a lot of local government. Like, not that I can name any of them or really talk about most of them, but local government was a big deal. Like, it's an easy target, right? Because technically they're usually way behind.
Way behind.
Budget-wise, they're even farther behind. And like they have so much sensitive information and they have like so much impact if you bring that down. So like that threat model's all over the place. So there was another one government related. United Nations suffered a hack. This came out towards the end of January, but it actually happened like a year prior, I think. It was relatively sophisticated infiltration of UN networks in Geneva and Vienna. Likely espionage, and the world body kept it quiet. An internal confidential document leaked and was covered, says that dozens of servers were compromised, including the UN Human Rights Office, which collects a whole bunch of sensitive data. So like basically this happened and they kept it a secret for a really long time. Now there's parts of that like from the IR guy and me kind of understands. Maybe they weren't done with the investigation. Who knows? But there's other parts of me that say this seems to be a really long time, and the staff weren't informed either. Like the president of the staff council said, he received an email informing about an infrastructure maintenance work. Not that anything that had happened. So like, it'll be interesting to see if anything comes of that data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you should finish it out because I think my last piece of news will lead us into our topic really well.
Well, I can do that. But I got like two more. Anyway, so another one, we talk about the third party, the supply chain stuff, right? Mm-hmm. You know what you don't expect from a supply chain perspective? Your AV provider. So Trend Micro had a 0 day that was used in the Mitsubishi Electric hack. So Chinese hackers used a 0-day in the Trend Micro Office Scan antivirus during their attacks on Mitsubishi Electric. It's patched now, but like, hey, your AV is your vector, and that we totally live in that world now. Like that happens, and it's not now, like it's happened before, but definitely kind of interesting. And like stolen document wise, like employment applications, employee survey, information on their workers that retired, files with corporate confidential technical materials, sales materials, stuff like that. Genuinely, if you can try to pay close attention to your 0 days, you should. On that same note, though, when we talk,
I just want to say one thing. Like, I know it's happened in the past, but the AVs are like the whole. Takes a lot more resources in order to leverage a 0-day like that. But a lot of those agents do run at the kernel level in the operating system, which is below admin and below service. So it's one of those, like, if you can get a 0-day in this, you get really good access to the entire system.
You get everything.
Yeah.
So as we talk about keeping an eye on 0 days, I'm going to make a callback to Andrew Thompson's episode, which was a wonderful, wonderful episode. And this is a little close to me because it's Maryland, which is where I used to live. Maryland bill would outlaw ransomware and potentially keep researchers from reporting bugs. Requires consent before infecting, criminalizes other computing. Specifically, where this is going, and I'm going to read this comically because I think it's comical. Like the way laws are written, I just think is comical, right? The bill would outlaw unauthorized intentional access or attempts to access all or part of a computer network, computer control language, computer software, computer system, computer service, or computer database, or copy, attempt to copy, possess, attempt to possess the contents of all or part of a computer database that was accessed. It would also criminalize under Maryland law any intent to cause the malfunction or interrupt the operation of all or any part of a network, the computers on it, or their software and data, or possess, identify, and attempt to identify a valid access code or publicize or distribute a valid access code to an unauthorized person.
Yeah.
This weekend, I read from an article.
That sounds crazy. But I'm trying to remember the name, but there was a bill that was passed into law that was for consumer protection about testing. It was focused on security products, but it was about testing security products in a comparative stance where some of those wordings in that law would actually contradict that federal law in the case of security products.
It's quite possible. And there's no research exclusions in this. So one of the things that we talked about when we brought up this problem was like, if we don't figure out the next step, right? If we don't work to figure out the next step, one of the possibilities is that it's going to get regulated for us because of the damage. In this case, this looks like an attempt to regulate it for us because of the damage. It's could potentially be very damning and very damaging. So it's really, really something worth keeping up on, this kind of stuff. Because, you know, as much as I may not be a proponent of like OffSec tools or OSTs, this could be really damaging. Because what if like somebody's doing testing and then reports a bug and then they get fucking thrown in jail?
Yeah.
Or like a huge fine, right? Like not even from a public disclosure, just from trying to report it to the company. They're like, well, we didn't authorize you to test. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes and where anything else that comes out of this goes as we go forward. And worth reading. Again, link will be on the website. That's me. So I pass the torch.
The last one that I have here is an interesting little article that I came across where the Safe Breach company was testing out a theory on new ransomware, specifically utilizing the encrypting file system that is part of Windows systems. It's an older file system that's, copyright to them. And part of it came up because this came up on a day when I got asked by a compliance person where I work about how in the incident response plan we're going to respond to a cyber pandemic. And
pandemic?
Yeah. We'll get into that another time, but
man, a pandemic.
A pandemic. It was my first response was like, hello, buzzword bingo 2020.
That's a very serious and loaded word.
Um,
Damn, a pandemic. Sorry, like I'm going to be stuck on that for like the rest of this.
It's fantastic. Yes, cyber pandemic. But in this, like, so they developed this ransomware that utilizes the EFS system itself to do the encryption and control it. Now, part of what got me on the connections of the pandemic was this was made in a lab as a testing a theory to see if it's possible to do. And every time that I watch these fantastic horror or apocalyptic movies, it is something developed in a lab that gets released in the world that causes a pandemic.
It's a pandemic. Speaking of pandemic, that's a really good board game. Like one of my favorites.
And if anyone in the Portland area wants to play Legacy, I've had the group, the box, and no group to play with.
I have that same problem. But I lost my gaming group.
Yes. But definitely like check out the link because it goes into some of the benefits and shortcomings. The benefits itself that made it a little scary was the ransomware works at the kernel level. They're encrypted with the NTFS drivers, so it goes unnoticed by the file system filters. It doesn't require admin, and it doesn't require human interaction.
Also, beware the cyber pandemic. It's coming. It's 2020. It's happening.
But that leads us into
screaming in the streets and looting and pandemicness. We're going to lose whole cities off the map.
And if we get infected by the virus that starts with the pandemic, how do we go about determining if it is part of the pandemic or not?
Oh, that's a good question. So that brings us kind of, I guess, to the topic, right?
Yeah.
So
choo.
For about 6 years, and I'll preface this a little bit because this is going to be a little different than usual for me. Plus, like, you have some input here too. For like 6 years, I've been teaching this concept of like introduction to malware analysis with the sole desire to make the concept of malware analysis, at least at a base level, accessible to people so that they are capable of obtaining useful information from suspicious files. A lofty goal, maybe, but I think people have found general value from it. So tonight we're going to talk about file analysis. The first kind of step in talking about file analysis, though, is like splitting it into the two core parts, right? That static and dynamic thing. Mm-hmm. And for the rest of it, we'll probably talk about static now, and then we'll probably never talk about it again, at least for this episode. We'll probably go into dynamic, and we can explain why. But like, would you like to do the honors of explaining the difference?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So static analysis is your code analysis. It's your GIDRA and your IDA and like your raw set code analysis. It's you going into the bits and bytes and looking at things and figuring out what happened. Dynamic is you interacting in some way with the malware. In most IR situations, in most like even internal teams and SOC teams and whatnot, you end up with this concept where like customers don't pay me to do code analysis. It's just not a thing. That's a research thing, right? What we do is we do like quick and dirty dynamic analysis, which in 90% of the time is going to give you what you need to move forward, including like how to find this across your network, which we'll talk about later. So that's really the first piece of this, that concept of like static versus dynamic. And we'll talk about dynamic. Then we'll talk about why everyone from the SOC analyst, or we should start by talking about why everyone from the SOC analyst up should be doing this kind of work. Although I know you wanted to talk about what was it? When to escalate?
When to escalate? Yeah. So
never.
this kind of harkens back to a little bit of the whole tiered versus non-tiered that we brought up in a previous episode too. But I did want to bring up that there are some organizations that do put hard line stops with malware analysis, where some say
because they're wrong.
Some say the SOC analyst can do something like search virus total, or if you happen to be in one that has like a local area that you can submit it to, or like submit it to Palo Alto's wildfire system to get a report back. That's kind of where the delineating line is. But if you need skilled individual to actually go to a host to collect the sample itself. There are some SOCs that draw the line there and say that needs to be escalated to a forensics team.
So you know what I do when a SOC draws the line there? I draw the line and quit. It actually happened. Like full disclosure, like I was at a job. It was relatively early in my career, and I was working with one of the tier 3 malware guys, right? And I was like, I really want to do malware, so he taught me stuff. And then like I got the opportunity, and then I like started to do it. And one of the other tier 3 guys came and goes, "No, you're not allowed to do that. That's not allowed. Only tier 3 people do malware analysis." And I said, "Oh, okay, I quit. I'm gonna go find a job that lets me do this." I mean, I didn't quit on the spot. Like I did line up another job. Please do not quit irresponsibly, especially if you need that for a living. But typically I was like, well, you know what? I want to do that. So I'm going to find another job. Now I run a team. So I get to be like, I expect you to do this. This is part of your job because I think it should be. And so, it's totally not mythical. It's accessible.
And I was just going to say, so I couldn't really quit to find another job in the situation I was in. So I did the hacker thing. And instead of getting it from the host, I just pulled it from a PCAP file as the file itself was transferred across the edge.
Naughty.
So I was like, well, here's the executable in the PCAP. I can just extract it from the PCAP and do it that way.
Oh, I used to reconstruct stuff from PCAPs all the time.
Yeah. So that's a way to, like, if you're in a situation where you're supposed to escalate, but I don't know, go ahead. If you feel comfortable enough, you want to grow, pull it from the PCAP and use some of these techniques.
Or use these tips and techniques outside of your job because there's 1,000 places that you can go download live malware samples from. You can totally do this at your house.
Yes.
So like first, we should talk about doing that safely.
Yes.
So there's a couple things that come into this. Know what kind of malware you're going to be looking at. The majority of malware, not all, but the majority of standard malware that exists today is created for Windows because Windows still has the biggest market share. 2019, we started to see a lot more ransomware for Linux. We started to see just, Mac stuff become more prevalent. Like all that is happening. But the majority of malware is made for Windows. Some advanced malware can do what we call escaping a virtual machine, which means it can break out and infect the rest of your network. So my first tip, if you're going to do this, you probably shouldn't be bare metal Windows. Just a suggestion. Because if you do break out, you kind of want to be on an operating system that you can't infect, right? That's the safe way. So then you get into kind of the tool suite for that. And like Linux is really good for this. And there's several distributions of Linux. I, for a long time, have used Remnux. I like Remnux. I think it's really cool. I think it works really well. I don't use base Remnux because I don't like their interface. I use Ubuntu 14.04 with the Remnux packages installed. Just more my speed. I have it on bare metal. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not the only one too, right? Because you have distributions out there like Sift, FTK, the Forensic Toolkit. Like, there's options out there. They're all very similar with their offerings.
If you like Windows, FireEye has Flare VM.
Yeah.
Which is a thing. And Flare VM has some really cool tools. And there are some really cool malware analysis tools kind of made like for Windows. And Flare is a really cool toolkit for that.
So we definitely encourage, if this is something you're interested in, go try out each one until you find the one you feel most comfortable with, and then use that one.
I'm about to start playing with one called Tsuragi Linux, which is like a defer Linux distro. It has most of the stuff that I like in Remnux, but it's newer. Some of my guys are actually like, I learned this from my analysts because one of my analysts went to a SANS forensics class and they were using this, or somebody told them about it. And then he started using it. Then the rest of my team started using it. I'm like, oh, cool. Fucking new toy. I should try this out.
That's exactly how it works in a SOC. One person finds a cool new toy. Everybody plays with it.
Right. So like from there, so you've got your hard box, and your hard box is Linux or whatever. Then from a dynamic perspective, you're going to want a virtual machine. That virtual machine, you're probably going to want to be Windows. Depending on what you're doing, you're probably going to want an Office suite on it because a lot of this crap is macro enabled. But we'll talk about some tricks about why you might not need that and how you can get past that as we go. And then on that box, you're going to want and care about a couple things starting out, right? You're going to care about network connections that get made. So you can do that in a couple ways. You can do that with a tool called Fiddler for like web connections, or Wireshark, which is, your Swiss Army knife of that. It'll capture all your connections and it's awesome. So like that's one thing that if you're analyzing something, you basically always want that running. I didn't know if you were going to say something.
No, the coughing fits that I was mentioning, I'm trying to hold back.
Bummer. Then you have one of Microsoft's tools, not as easily hackable as PowerShell, thankfully. Windows sysinternals. So that includes things like Process Explorer. So Process Explorer is basically just going to show you every open process and any new processes, and it's going to kind of child parent them. So like if Word kicks off, PowerShell kicks off something else, like you'll kind of see that, and that's convenient. Mm-hmm. It's good to have that open. Now here's something about Process Explorer, and there's another one, Process Monitor, that I think you can actually log some of this stuff. Process Explorer, you got to be a little quick. So you got to kind of watch shit as it goes. So typically I'll like leave Wireshark in the back and I'll leave Fiddler in the back or whatever. And then I'll watch Process Explorer and see what happens like in real time. And then registry changes. So you want something like RegShot. All these are free tools, by the way, just to be clear, like none of these are paid enterprise tools. Like everything we're talking about tonight, for the most part, is free. RegShot does some cool stuff. So you basically open it, you click, take a snapshot. It takes a full snapshot of your registry. Then you run your malware, you let it sit, and then you click take a second snapshot, and then you hit the compare button. And it'll basically say what changed in my registry in the amount of time that I had this thing running. And it basically compares those two snapshots. Super cool tool. One thing to know, though, is on your VM, make sure that you give everything that needs to communicate a chance to communicate and update and do all that stuff, because like everything touches the registry. So you want that output to be as clean as humanly possible. Right. So like that's your basic toolkit for this kind of stuff. For dynamic analysis, non-sandboxed, this is the basic toolkit that I use, plus the tools that are in Remnux. Anything to add, anything to elaborate on, and then I can kind of go into an example.
I think the only thing that I want to add to keep in mind as people explore this is sometimes you don't need these tools, these fancy tools. And if you have, let's say, as we progress through the tools and you manage to get access to the malicious code itself, you can use the developer console in web browsers in order to step through and see how that code interacts, especially if it's obfuscated and doesn't make it human readable. So sometimes just having a web browser available is a sufficient tool to help you through this process.
It's very true. So like let's pitch a scenario, right, about how you can do this. And this will actually call into some of the Remnux tools. Because there's a significant amount of them. So like you get an email with a PDF, right? Like, Exiled, you have received a PDFified email about your billing situation.
Yay.
And that's important to you. Like you really care about your
because
billing,
I care about a PayPal account I don't have. I'm going to open that.
Exactly. Oops. So instead of opening it when you get it from an analysis perspective, which you can totally do, and it'll oftentimes be like, hey, we want to open Microsoft Word or whatever, because Microsoft Word's where you deliver VB script. You can use a suite of tools in Remnux called like there's PDF ID, PDF parser, and PDF detach, which will basically break down a PDF. So like PDF parser will break down the PDF into different sections, and you can actually go through and like look at different code sections. What exists? Is there JavaScript? Is there an embedded document? So on and so forth. PDF ID will basically just print, like, is there something in it? It'll be like, hey, there's a doc there. And PDF detach will save off that file for you. So you can name the specific file, or you can do like a tac all and save off whatever files exist inside that PDF without ever having to open it, which is really convenient. Then now we have a document. And trust me, it's definitely not suspicious when somebody puts a Word document inside of a PDF. That's completely normal.
Yeah.
Hopefully this mic picks up the sarcasm.
And if
I'm not sure yet.
If it doesn't, and someone's transcribing this /s.
Right? That goes for silly, right? Sorry. So when you get to that point, like, you can go open your Word document. And in general, when you're doing an investigation like this, especially if it's something that's commonly seen or you've gotten it from somewhere else, or there's already matches on VirusTotal, like, don't be afraid to interact safely. Don't be afraid to interact safely. So like, yeah, you can pop it into your VM and you can open it and you can see the little enable macro button, and then you can enable macros and see what happens. And that's cool. But like, maybe I want to know what's inside of it. Mm-hmm. You can do that direct from Word. Like, you can go to like the script editor or the macro editor in Word and go look at it. But like, it's convoluted and a pain in the ass. You can also run a tool called a tool package suite called OLE tools, which exists on most of these distros by default, which are really cool. So you do like OLE VBA for Visual Basic, and it'll just command line print out your script. Like, hey, boom, like that's the script that's trying to run. Oftentimes it'll be obfuscated or base64 encoded or a bunch of different stuff, decimal encoded, doesn't matter. Then you can pop this into one of the most amazing tools ever made, CyberChef.
I was going to be like Moloch. No.
CyberChef. Are you familiar with CyberChef?
I have looked at the website and talked to a couple of people about it, but I have not used it yet.
Dude, CyberChef is one of the most amazing things in the world, because you can take any encoded string or any plain text string and basically it builds recipes. So you can take the string, you can put it in, you can say, well, that's decimal encoded with a delimiter comma. And then you can just pop over the decimal thing, select delimiter as comma, and it decodes it for you. You can do that online, or you can download it to your own box. Like, easy enough. Like, you can always store a local copy. If you don't want to be connected to the internet, you can have a local copy, which is super cool. Really, really useful tool. Now all of a sudden you're starting to understand, like, this is decoded and you're starting to understand what it does. So you can go wget the file that it's calling for, or whatever the case may be. Multiple trains of thought here. If you have the code, you can usually get any call out URLs that exist, because that's usually what this PowerShell is doing, right? It's hard coding URLs to call out to pull something down. Good to know what those are. If you don't have the ability to get this code, or you can't get it decoded, here's a suggestion. Go into your VM, enable macros, turn off network connectivity. Let it run for like 15, 20 minutes. If it can't connect to the first URL, it'll move to the second one, move to the third one, move to the fourth one, however many it has. You get a full network list just like that, which also kind of a cool trick. And like, knowing when to have your network off versus on, and like the benefits of those two things, is really useful.
And not just for that, I'm going to dip in here just a little bit and mention a couple of evasion techniques that I've seen. So the whole on versus off, like, there's a number of pieces of malware that will do initial callouts to like Microsoft.com, what's my IP.com, things like that, as an internet check. So it's not uncommon to run these VMs without direct access to the World Wide Web. And that's one way that they can see if they're running in a virtual state that's attempting to analyze the malware.
You can get around that to some extent with things like iNetSim.
Yes.
Which try to simulate an internet connection. It doesn't always work, especially if that first test like actually requires something specific back from a host.
Yep.
But tools like iNetSim, also free, you can use to kind of simulate that initial first step, or at least make it look like your computer's connected to the internet, even if it's not.
And the other one that I saw a lot was checking for the number of cores. So it's not uncommon that even if you run a virtual
VM
Windows,
evasion.
VM evasion, yep. So if they see a single core, then the malware itself doesn't run.
Yep. So, I mean, now we're actually getting into the malware, because we've just gotten a sample of this malware. Like, that happened. We downloaded it. We have it now. It's a thing. Now is where we move into our VM. And we click all the things.
Let it have
because
fun.
We can. So we basically stage. So we talked a bit about Wireshark. We talked a bit about RegShot. We talked a bit about Process Explorer. We're basically going to stage this stuff. We're going to turn it on. We're going to take our snapshots. We're going to do that kind of stuff. And then we're going to double click that executable file. And we're going to see what happens. We're going to see what registry changes get made. We're going to see what network callouts happen. We're going to see what processes get open. We're going to see all that kind of stuff. All that kind of stuff is good information for an analyst something that they can use for other stuff, which again, we'll talk about in a little bit. Sometimes if it doesn't run, there are things like that you have to do. Add extra cores, make sure it can connect to the internet sometimes. Like sometimes that's just a thing. Sometimes you want it to, because you want to know what happens next. If it can't connect out, you don't know.
Exactly. And then going back to, like you were saying, there's trying for the different domains in the command and control to send the information back. That's how you learn more of that too. Or if it's using like a domain generating algorithm to figure out which one's active, you can start to learn the pattern of the potential command and control domains and IP addresses that way.
Yep. So when I used to do analysis, I used to do one run network off, one run network on. Basically set up your VM, get all your tools ready to go, and like not necessarily like staged, but like get your tools on your box, take a clean snapshot, and then you can just revert to it, and it makes life really easy. So then we kind of come into the last piece, and we talked about this a little bit, I think, in other episodes, the sandbox, like automated sandboxes, which are super cool. However, they don't always do a lot to help you learn. They do a lot to tell you stuff, and they're really cool. Like if you run it yourself and then you run it in a sandbox and you look and you go, oh, hey, look, I found that. Oh, hey, I found that. I didn't find that. I should go figure that out. Like really useful for that purpose. I am personally a big fan of Cuckoo, which is free, open source, a bit of a pain in the ass to install. But functions really, really cool. We'll spin up your own VM, do the analysis in-house. You can give it a whole bunch of stuff. You can have it go through Tor. You can have it use INetSim. You can have it not connect to the internet, whatever you want. A lot of different packages and options. And then it'll spit you out a really pretty report that says, hey, we think this is bad, or hey, we think it's not. Really useful from a quick and dirty perspective. But again, like I genuinely suggest that people do it the hard way because it's a good learning experience.
And then that way you understand what you're reading when you use the automated services.
Exactly. I am a strong believer of like clicking through, like and understanding that entire chain from a clicking through perspective, not just trusting the report that gets spit out, right? I want to see like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Like I need that to understand what's going on. That's who I am as a person.
This kind of goes back to the standard SOC mantra that I'm familiar with: trust but verify.
Mm-hmm. And let them actually do shit that's important.
Mm-hmm.
So, I suppose, I mean, anything to add, or does that bring us into our detection?
I think it brings us into the detection part itself pretty good.
I think it does. So where this one gets, so basically, instead of giving you like what we would call like a static detection, like go use this to find badness, what we're going to do is we're going to take this skill set, this thing that you can now maybe do with some practice. Maybe we explained it really badly. I don't know. But you can take this thing and then you can say, what can I find from this kind of information? And then how can I use that in my environment?
Yeah, and I do want to start it off with a caveat on this about the longevity of the things that you do find. So it's just something to keep in mind that some of these things are not going to last very long, and they're good for maybe 2 weeks to 3 months.
That's correct. But chances are, if one person submitted this to like, this is a suspicious email place, chances are more people got it and some of them might have clicked. So like, they're the most useful the day of. Like this information becomes so useful for like figuring out the impact to your organization, because that's awesome. Because you could say, yeah, 50 people got that email, but do I have any C2 activity? Go ahead.
I was just going to say about 6-9 months down the road, it's a lot less likely.
Probably. Although I have seen some actors successfully use the same malware for like 5 years. Like it's a thing, like same C2, same everything, like successfully for like 5 years.
But that is definitely my experience, more the exception rather than the rule.
It is definitely the exception more than it is the rule. And like C2 stuff's easy to change. So like we talk about what you can gain from this. So you can gain. So if we hit each step, so we have the email, right?
Yep.
We have the PDF. We can gain that. We have the Word doc indicator. We have the script that runs from the Word doc. So if you have any kind of process monitoring on.
And if we back up again to the email really quick, You can have a potentially compromised malicious mail server that's serving it up. If it's not, I mean, there's evasion techniques, but you can use the email itself to try to find some other commonalities and choke points in the delivery.
Correct. If you're running PowerShell logging and it was PowerShell, running from that VB, you have PowerShell commands now. You have initial stagers. So like that PowerShell command calls out to 4 URLs. You have those 4 URLs. You can look for those 4 URLs. Mm-hmm. Typically, they're going to be compromised websites that store something. So they're not going to stay really good for long, but they'll be good for a while. And then as you're going through this, you have registry changes. You have file modifications. Maybe this file injects itself into SVC host and then starts beaconing. Well, now you know that. And now you can look for SVC hosts that don't match. And you can look for the beacon, which is super great because chances are you're not going to see a lot of it. You're not going to see random unrelated connections mid this thing just came out. If you see IP connections, they're probably going to be beaconing if you've determined that this is the beacon IP. Right. Anything else? Oh, well, I'll let you get through that. So there's genuinely just a lot of really valuable information that you can get. And I mean, we're talking about a 15-minute to 30-minute process, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on the file.
No. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to say, so the other stuff would just be more fringe specific use case stuff, misspellings or static user agent strings in the calls, or an old malware that would send its command and control through a base 64 encoded string in the body of the HTTP GET request.
Yeah.
Things like that. You can find little interesting one-off things that are behavioral, and those are the kinds of behaviors that various researchers use to start to put the malware into families.
Yeah, pretty much. And I guess that basically wraps us up. So, I mean,
think so.
XL, take us out.
Thanks for joining us. This was another one of our Bringing It Back to Basics episodes. So take it, use it, provide feedback, and to go forth and find badness.